Hey everyone, I'm Liz, and today I'm going to show you how I made one of these um, wizard hats. Um, for this tutorial, you can use this tutorial to make one of these hair clips like I've made here, or you could use it to sew onto a doll like I've done here with this black one. For this tutorial, you can use just about any color yarn you want. I used black for this hat and purple for this one. Um, if you're going to do the stars and moons that are on this hat, you're also going to need some yellow yarn for the moons and some silver thread for the stars. You're also going to need a needle to sew your thread with and also a needle to sew your yarn with. You're also going to need a crochet hook. I'm using a size E and a pair of scissors to cut off your yarn. And if you're going to make this into a hair clip like I've done with this one, you're going to need some little hair clips. And I just found these at the dollar store. And you're just going to want to just slip them right over that stitch when you're done. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a magic circle. So I'm going to make a loop with my yarn. I'm going to take that loop with this hand. Oops. Now I'm going to insert my hook into that loop and pull up another loop and then chain one off of that loop. And that's going to fasten my magic loop. And if I was going to be working with single crochets, I would start to single crochet into the loop. But I'm going to be working double crochets, so I'm going to chain up one more time so that I can get it up to the height of double crochet. And now I'm going to add 5 double crochets to my loop. So yarn over, pull up a loop through the middle of that of the magic circle, and then pull through 2 and pull through 2. Okay, so now I'm just going to double crochet 4 more times on my circle. Okay, so now I have a total of 6 stitches on my circle, so now I'm just going to pull the tail to close the circle. Okay, so now I'm going to continue to the next row, and I'm just going to double crochet onto the first stitch that I made right here. So I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into that first stitch and pull up a loop, and then I'm going to just double crochet. Now that's going to be the first stitch of my row. So I'm going to take this safety pin and I'm going to use it as a stitch marker. I'm going to insert the safety pin into that first stitch that I made. Okay. And now I'm just going to double crochet in every stitch all the way around the row until I get back to that stitch marker. Okay, so I'm on the last double crochet of the row, and as you can see, my stitch marker is right here in the next stitch. So I'm going to remove my stitch marker to do the next row. I'm just going to do the first stitch of the row and then replace my stitch marker. Okay, now I'm going to replace my stitch marker. Okay. And now in this row, I'm going to increase 1 time. So I'm just going to increase this this next stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch. And then I'm going to go ahead and double crochet once. And then I'm going to go double crochet in the same stitch again. Okay. Now I'm just going to continue until I get back to that stitch marker. Okay, so I have finished with the last stitch of this row, so I'm going to remove my stitch marker and do the first stitch of the next row. Then I'm going to put my stitch marker back. Okay, so in this row I'm going to increase twice. I'm going to go on for a couple more stitches because my increase in my last row is right here, and I don't want to put them in the exact same place in every row. So I'm going to go on for a few more stitches. And once I get past that first increase that I did, or once I get past the increase I did in the last row, I'm going to add another increase, and then before I get to the end of the row, I'm going to increase one more time. So there's going to be 2 increases in this row. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this next stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to double crochet into the same stitch. And now I have my increase right there. So now I'm going to continue, and I'm going to increase right before I get to the end of the row. So the very next stitch, I suppose. I'm going to go ahead and increase again. And as you can see, I've gotten to the end of the row, so I'm going to go ahead and remove my stitch marker and do the first stitch of the next row. I'm going to put back my stitch marker, and again in this next row I'm going to increase 2 times before the end of the row. And just like before, I'm going to try to not put my increases in the same spot that I did last time. So I'm going to, instead of putting it here or on this side of the stitch marker, I'm going to try to put them on this side. So I'm just going to go ahead and increase the very next stitch just to get that first increase over with. Okay. And now I'm going to go on for a few more stitches before doing my second increase. Okay. I'm going to increase the next stitch. Alright, and now that my second increase is made, I'm going to just double crochet until I get back to my stitch marker. So once again, I've gotten to my stitch marker, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And as you can see, the width of the hat is getting slowly wider. So I'm going to do another row of increasing twice. First, I'm going to put my first stitch in there. And then I'm going to mark my stitch again. Okay. And now in this row, I'm going to increase twice. So the first increase, I'm going to put right after the increase that I did in the last row, which is right here. Okay, so I've gotten past my first, my increase from the last row, so I'm going to go ahead and increase the next stitch. And now I just have to increase one more time before the row ends, so I'm going to do it after this other increase from the last row. Okay, so I've gotten past that last increase. I'm going to increase this stitch now. So there's my second increase of the row done. And now I'm just going to double crochet until I get to my stitch marker. Okay, so I've gotten to the end of that row, so I'm just going to remove my stitch marker again. And now for this next row, I'm going to increase 3 times instead of 2, so that the bottom of the hat will start to get even wider. So I'm going to do my first stitch. And then I'm going to replace my stitch marker. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase that same stitch that I just did. So the first stitch is going to be increased this time. Okay. And now I'm going to go on for a couple more stitches, and I'm going to add another increase, and then I'm going to add another one toward the end. So I'm just going to go ahead and increase this stitch now. And now I'm going to go on until I get to a little bit before the stitch marker, and I'm going to increase one more time. So I've gone on for a few more stitches, and as you can see, my stitch marker is right here, and the last increase from the last row is right here. So I'm going to increase this stitch that I'm on right now. It's a couple stitches before the increase from the last row. And now I'm just going to finish the row. And in the next row, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to increase 3 times before I get back to my stitch marker. Okay, so here's my stitch marker. I'm just going to remove it real quick. I'm going to do the first stitch of the row and put my stitch marker back. And now in this row, I'm going to increase 3 times, just like I did in the last row. And I'm going to do it between this increase and this one. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this stitch right here. Then I'm going to go on for a few more stitches and do another increase. Okay, now that I have gotten past that second increase from the last row, I'm going to add another increase. So I'll just increase this next stitch here. Okay, and now I'm just going to double crochet until I get to almost the end of the row. And then I'm going to increase one last time in this row. Okay, so I've pretty much gotten to the end of the row, so I'm just going to increase the last stitch. And now I'm just going to continue doing that same pattern for a few more rows until the bottom of the hat is the size that I want it to be. It depends on what size you're going to use this hat for. If you're going to make it for a doll, then you could just stop here, or you could continue on for a few more rows to make it a little bit larger for a larger size doll, or you could use it as a hair decoration. But I'm just going to continue adding 3 increases to every row. First I'm going to remove my stitch marker though. And I'm just going to continue that pattern until the hat is the size that I want. So I've gotten to the end of 3 more rows of increasing 3 times in each row. I'm going to remove my stitch marker. And I've gotten to the length of the hat that I want it to be. So I'm going to now make the brim. Now, if you wanted to not make a brim and just leave it like just a cone shape, then you could just end it right here. So for the next stitch, I'm just going to slip stitch down. And if you were going to end it here, you could just cut off your yarn. But I'm actually going to add a brim to this hat, so I'm going to do that by, I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch in every row, or in every stitch, until I get back to the beginning. I'm going to reinsert my stitch marker. So I'm just going to slip stitch all the way around so that I can do the brim of the hat in the next row. Okay, so I've gotten to the end of my row of slip stitches, so I'm going to remove my stitch marker again. And now in this next row, I'm going to add 6 increases to this row so that the brim will come out flat around the bottom of the hat. And you don't have to do this, but I'm going to be adding a another color just around the edge of the brim when I'm done. So to do that, I'm going to leave this loop here open to the outside of the hat, and I'm going to be working in this loop instead. So I'm just going to slip stitch into that loop, and then I'm going to go ahead and chain 1. Now if you wanted to do a more floppy brim for the hat, then you could use double crochets and chain up 1 more time, and then do the row in double crochets, increasing 6 times all the way around. But I'm actually going to do single crochets so that the brim of the hat isn't floppy at all. I just want it to be a rigid brim. So I'm just going to chain 1, and I'm going to insert my hook into that bottom loop. As you can see, there's 2 loops here. I'm just going to insert into the back loop, and I'm just going to single crochet. And it doesn't have to be exact with where you're going to put your increases. Just make sure that there are 6 of them all the way around. I'm going to reinsert my stitch marker real quick. And now I'm just going to single crochet all the way around. I'm going to add my first increase here. And then I'm going to continue around. I'm going to go ahead and add another increase right here. So there's my second increase of the row. And I'm going to continue and just add another 4 increases so that I have a total of 6 increases in the row. Okay, so now I have 6 increases all the way around in this row, and as you can see, the brim is starting to shape out. So now I'm just going to continue adding 6 increases in every row until I get a brim that is the width that I want it to be. So I'm going to remove my stitch marker, and now I'm just going to increase every few stitches so that I have a total of 6 increases per row. So I've done 4 more rows for the brim, and now I've gotten to my last row. So I'm just going to do my last stitch of the row, remove my stitch marker, and then I'm just going to slip stitch to that first stitch of the row. Also, I'm going to cut off my yarn, and depending on whether or not you want to sew this to a doll, you might want to cut off a long tail so that you can sew the tail toward the inside of the hat and sew that that row of loops that we left at the bottom to the head of a doll. And I'm going to cut off a long tail just so that I can do that later. I'm going to go ahead and pull that tail toward the inside of the work, and later on I'm going to sew it toward the middle of the hat. And now I'm going to show you how to put a ribbon of another color around the brim. So I'm going to use some yellow yarn so that I can show you how to do the brim of the hat. When I come back and do it, I'm going to come back again later and do it again in black because I actually want to have a black ribbon instead of yellow, but I'm going to use yellow to show you guys how to do it so that you can see the stitches a little easier. So I'm going to insert my hook into one of those loops that I left open on this bottom row here, and I'm going to pull up a loop. I'm starting at the back of the work, as you can see from where my tail is. And now I'm going to just slip stitch into all of these little loops that I left open from the last time I was on this row. Okay, I'm going to pull on my tail just a little bit so that the stitches stay even. And I'm going to go all the way around with this yellow slip stitch. And I'm going to slip stitch in every single loop that I left open. Okay, so I've gone around the entire hat with my row of slip stitches. I've gotten back to the stitch that I started on. So I'm just going to now insert my hook into that first stitch that I made and slip stitch one more time. So now I'm going to do a row of single crochets all the way around. I'm going to go into the top loop of every slip stitch that I just made. So I'm going to chain one for my first stitch, and then I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop and single crochet all the way around. Okay, so I finished with the last stitch of the row, so in order to finish, I would just go on and slip stitch to that first stitch that I made. And right here you could cut off your yarn. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to redo this with black yarn. But if you wanted to just leave it like this, you could, or you could cut off a long tail and sew the top of the ribbon to the hat so that it doesn't flip down like this. And now the hat will be pretty much done. So as you can see, I've added a bunch of stars and moons to this hat, and I'm going to show you how I did that just now. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how I made these stars. To do that, I used this silver thread. You can use any kind of silver thread that you want. You could use embroidery floss if you wanted to, or you could just use a silvery gray thread. So I have my silver thread already on my needle. Okay. And I'm just going to place another star right here underneath these two moons. And I didn't really put them in any particular order. I just tried to space them out a little bit, and also I wanted to have a lot more stars than I did moons. But you can do this in any way that you like. Okay, so now I'm just going to pull up my silver thread. Okay. And now I'm just going to do a rough star shape. I'm going to go straight up from where I started my thread. I'm going to go in there, and then I'm going to come back out on the side right here. And now I'm just going to have one straight line straight across of silver. Now I'm going to go across that the other way so that I have what looks like a plus sign. So I'm just going to lay it across like that. Insert my needle. Then I'm going to come up between those two stitches around here. Now, as you can see, I have a rough plus sign, and my thread is coming out between the two arms of the plus sign. I'm going to go across again so that it looks like this. And now I'm just going to retrace all of those lines. So I'm going to come back out next to this this second line that I did, right up here. And then I'm just going to go back down and retrace all of the lines that I made. I'm going to go across this way and bring my thread back up above one of the other lines. And as you can see, the star is starting to take shape. Okay, so that star is just about done. So now I'm going to go ahead and sew this end into the inside of the piece. Okay, and now I'm just going to cut off my thread. Okay. Now the star is done, and I'm going to show you how to do the moon right here. Okay, I have my yellow yarn threaded on my yarn needle. Now I'm just going to, where I want my moon to be, I'm going to put one straight line. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail so that I can tie the two tail ends together at the end. And I'm just going to make a straight line here. And then I'm going to come back out around here so that I can do this part going back toward the back of the moon. And now I'm going to go straight to the end of that thread. Come back out at the bottom and do the same on the opposite end. Okay, now I'm going to come back out behind that first line that I made. Okay, then I'm going to go straight up toward that top stitch. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to just tie these two ends together and that will be finished. So as you can see, the hat is now done, and I've added the clips to the bottom so that I can clip it into my hair. And I have also sewed this hat onto my doll. So if you guys have any questions or comments or suggestions, you guys can get in touch with me down in the comment section below or on Twitter, Tumblr, or Facebook. Links will be in the description.
And if you guys enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button and share this video. And if you'd like to see more tutorials in the future, then subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!